Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through town. A man there named Zacchaeus, a ruler among tax collectors, was rich. He was trying to see who Jesus was, but being a short man, he couldn't because of the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed up a sycamore tree so that he could see Jesus, who was about to pass that way. When Jesus came to the spot, he looked up and said, "Zacchaeus, come down at once. I must stay in your home today." So Zacchaeus came down at once, happy to welcome Jesus. Everyone who saw this grumbled, saying, "He is gone to be the guest of a sinner." Zacchaeus stopped and said to the Lord, "Look, Lord, I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I have cheated anyone out of anything, I repay them 4 times as much." Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this household, because he too is a son of Abraham. The human one came to seek and to save the lost." After he said this, as they listened to this, Jesus told them another parable, because he was near Jerusalem and they thought God's kingdom would appear right away. He said, "A certain man who was born into royalty went to a distant land to receive his kingdom and then return. He called together 10 servants and gave each of them money worth 4 months' wages. He said, 'Do business with this until I return.' His citizens hated him, so they sent a representative after him who said, 'We don't want this man to be our king.' After receiving his kingdom, he returned and called the servants to whom he had given the money to find out how much they had earned. The first servant came forward and said, 'Your money has earned a return of 1,000%. The king replied, 'Excellent, you are a good servant. Because you were faithful in a small matter, you will have authority over 10 cities.' The second servant came and said, 'Master, your money has made a return of 500%. To this one, the king said, 'You will have authority over 5 cities.' Another servant came forward and said, 'Master, here is your money. I wrapped it up in a scarf for safekeeping. I was afraid of you because you're a stern man. You withdraw what you haven't deposited and you harvest what you haven't planted.' The king replied, 'I will judge you by the words of your own mouth, you worthless servant. You know, did you, that I'm a stern man, withdrawing what I didn't deposit, and harvesting what I didn't plant? Why then didn't you put my money in the bank? Then when I arrived, at least I could have gotten it back with interest.' He said, 'Take his money.' He said to his attendants, 'Take his money and give it to the one who has 10 times as much.' 'But master,' they said, 'he already has 10 times as much.' He replied, 'I assure you that everyone who has will be given more, but from those who have nothing, even what they seem to have will be taken away from them.'" This is my YouTube video.
Hi, YouTube video.
That's my daughter. "As for those servants who don't want me as their king, bring them here and slaughter them before me." After Jesus said this, he continued on ahead, going up to Jerusalem. As he came to Bethphage and Bethany on the Mount of Olives, he gave 2 disciples a task. He said, "Go into the village over there. When you enter it, you will find tied up there a colt that no one has ever ridden. Untie it and bring it here. If someone says to you, really, if someone says to you, 'Why are you untying it?' just say, 'Its master needs it.'" They went and found those who had been sent found things exactly as he had said. As they were untying the colt, its owner said to them, "Why are you untying the colt?" They replied, "Its master needs it." They brought it to Jesus, threw their clothes on the colt, and lifted Jesus onto it. As Jesus rode along, they spread their clothes on the road. As Jesus approached the road leading down from the Mount of Olives, the whole throng of his disciples began rejoicing. They praised God with a loud voice because of all the mighty things they had seen. They said, "Glory to God, blessings on the King who comes in the name of the Lord, peace in heaven and glory in the highest heavens." Some of the Pharisees said to Jesus, "Teacher, scold your disciples." Hey! Sorry, that's my dog. Tell them to be quiet. Stop it. Scold your disciples. Tell them to be quiet. This is kind of a funny video, isn't it? I guess it's just real life. Scold your disciples. Tell them to be quiet. I better just set this here. This is where the dog wants to be. Scold your disciples. Tell them to be quiet. He answered, "I tell you, if they were silent, the stones would shout." As Jesus came to the city and observed it, he wept over it. He said, "If only you knew on this of all days the things that lead to peace, but now they are hidden from your eyes." The time will come when your enemies will build fortifications around you, encircle you, and attack you from all sides. They will crush you completely, you and the people within you. They won't leave one stone on top of another within you because you didn't recognize the time of your gracious visit from God. I'm kind of struggling on this video. Maybe it's like the dogs. I don't know, but I'm going to keep going anyway. Because you didn't recognize the time of your gracious visit from God. When Jesus entered the temple, he threw out those who were selling things there. He said to them, "It's written, my house will be a house of prayer, but you have made it a hideout for crooks." Jesus was teaching daily in the temple. The chief priests, legal experts, and the foremost leaders of the people were seeking to kill him. However, they couldn't find a way to do it because all the people were enthralled with what they heard. On one of the days when Jesus was teaching the people in the temple and proclaiming the good news, the chief priests, legal experts, and elders approached him. They said, "Tell us, what kind of authority do you have for doing these things? Who gave you this authority?" He replied, "I have a question for you. Tell me, was John's baptism of heavenly or of human origin?" They discussed among themselves. "If we say it's of heavenly origin, he'll say, 'Why didn't you believe him?' But if we say it's of human origin, all the people will stone us to death because they are convinced that John was a prophet." They answered that they didn't know where it came from. Then Jesus replied, "Neither will I tell you what kind of authority I have to do these things." Jesus told the people this parable. A certain man planted a vineyard, rented it to tenant farmers, and went on a trip for a long time. Stop. Doberman Pinschers, right? Anybody got them? Went on a trip for a long time. I'll let you guys see what it's like to have Doberman Pinschers while I recite Luke to you. And went on a trip for a long time. This is literally what it's like. Went on a trip for a long time. Yeah, they left. When it was time, he sent a servant to collect from the tenants his share of the fruit of the vineyard. But the tenants sent him away, beaten and empty-handed. The man sent another servant. But they beat him, treated him disgracefully, and sent him away empty-handed as well. He sent a third servant. They wounded this servant and threw him out. The owner of the vineyard said, "What should I do? I'll send my son, whom I love dearly. Perhaps they will respect him." But when they saw him, they said to each other, "This is the heir. Let's kill him so the inheritance will be ours." They threw him out of the vineyard and killed him. What will the owner of the vineyard do? He will come and destroy those tenants and give the vineyard to others. When the people heard this, they said, "May this never happen." Staring at them, Jesus said, "Then what is the meaning of this text of Scripture? The stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. Everyone who falls on that stone will be crushed, and the stone will crush the person it falls on." The legal experts and chief priests wanted to arrest him right then because they knew he had told the parable against him. The legal experts and chief priests were watching Jesus closely and sent spies who pretended to be sincere. They were trying to trap him in his words so they could hand him over to the jurisdiction and authority of the governor. They asked him, "Teacher, we know that you are correct in what you say and teach. You don't show favoritism, but teach God's way as it really is. Does the law allow people to pay taxes to Caesar or not?" Since Jesus recognized their deception, he said to them, "Show me a coin. Whose image and inscription does it have on it?" "Caesar's," they replied. Jesus said, "Then give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and to God what belongs to God." They couldn't trap him in his words in front of the people. Astonished by his answer, they were speechless. Some Sadducees, who deny that there's a resurrection, came to Jesus and asked, seriously, it's kind of entertaining. I don't know if you can listen to Luke and watch my Dobermans, but it is kind of entertaining. Came to Jesus and asked, "Teacher, Moses wrote for us that if a man's brother dies, leaving a widow but no children, the brother must marry the widow and raise up children for his brother. Now there were 7 brothers. The first man married a woman and died childless. The second and then the third brother married her. Eventually all 7 married her, and they all died without leaving any children. Finally, the woman died too. In the resurrection, whose wife will she be? All 7 were married to her." Oh my gosh, what did you guys get? What in the heck is that? Oh gosh. Dogs, right? All 7 were married to her. Jesus said to them, "People who belong to this age marry and are given in marriage, but those who are considered worthy to participate in that age, that is, in the age of the resurrection from the dead, won't marry nor be given in marriage. They can no longer die because they are like angels and are God's children, since they share in the resurrection. Even Moses demonstrates that the dead are raised in the passage about the bush when he speaks of the Lord as the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. He is not the God of the dead, but of the living. To him, they are all alive." Some of the legal experts responded, "Teacher, you have answered well." No one dared ask him anything else. Jesus said to them, "Why do they say that the Christ is David's son? David himself says in the scroll of the Psalms, 'The Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right side until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet.' Since David calls him Lord, how can he be David's son?" In the presence of all the people, Jesus said to his disciples, "Watch out for the legal experts. They like to walk around in long robes. They love being greeted with honor in the markets. They long for the places of honor in the synagogues and at banquets. They are the ones who cheat widows out of their homes, and to show off they say long prayers. They will be judged most harshly." Looking up, Jesus saw rich people throwing their gifts into the collection box for the temple treasury. He also saw a poor widow throw in 2 small copper coins worth a penny. He said, "I assure you that this poor widow has thrown in more than them all. All of them are giving out of their spare change, but she, from her hopeless poverty, has given everything she had to live on." Some people were talking about the temple, how it was decorated. What was that? How it was decorated with beautiful stones and ornaments dedicated to God. Jesus said, as for the things you're admiring, the time will come when not even one stone will be left upon another. All will be demolished. They asked him, Teacher, when will these things happen? What sign will show that these things are about to happen? Jesus said, watch out that you aren't deceived. Many will come in my name saying, I'm the one, and it's time. Don't follow them. When you hear of wars and rebellions, don't be alarmed. These things must happen first, but the end won't happen immediately. Then Jesus said to them, nations and kingdoms will fight against each other. There will be great earthquakes and terrifying sights and great signs. There will be great earthquakes and wide-scale food shortage and epidemics. There will also be terrifying sights and great signs in the sky. But before all this occurs, they will take you into custody and harass you because of your faith. They will hand you over to synagogues and prisons, and you'll be brought before kings and governors because of my name. This will provide you with an opportunity to testify. Make up your minds not to prepare your defense in advance. I'll give you words and wisdom that none of your opponents will be able to counter or contradict. You'll be betrayed by your parents, brothers and sisters, relatives and friends. They will execute some of you. Everyone will hate you because of my name. Still, not a hair on your heads will be lost. By holding fast, you will gain your lives. When you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then you will know that its destruction is close at hand. Then you will know that its destruction is close at hand. At that time, those in Judea must flee to the mountains. Those in the city must escape, and those in the countryside must not enter the city. These are the days of punishment when everything written will find its fulfillment. How terrible it will be at that time for women who are pregnant or for women who are nursing their children. There will be great agony on the earth and angry judgment on this people. They will fall by the edge of the sword and be taken away as captives among all nations. Jerusalem will be plundered by Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are concluded. There will be signs in the sun, moon, and stars. On the earth, there will be dismay among nations in their confusion over the roaring of the sea and surging waves. The planets and other heavenly bodies will be shaken, causing people to faint from fear and foreboding of what is coming upon the earth. Then they will see the human one coming on a cloud with power and great splendor. Now, when these things begin to happen, stand up straight and raise your heads because your redemption is near. Jesus told them a parable. Look at the fig tree and all the trees. When they sprout leaves, you can see for yourselves and know that summer is near. In the same way, when you see these things happening, you know that God's kingdom is near. I assure you that this generation won't pass away until everything has happened. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will certainly not pass away. Take care that your hearts aren't dulled by drinking parties, drunkenness, and the anxieties of day-to-day life. Don't let that day fall upon you unexpectedly like a trap. It will come upon everyone who lives on the face of the whole earth. Stay alert at all times, praying that you are strong enough to escape everything that is about to happen and to stand before the human one. Every day Jesus was teaching in the temple, but he spent each night on the Mount of Olives. All the people rose early in the morning to hear him in the temple area. The festival of unleavened bread, which is called Passover, was approaching. The festival of unleavened bread, which is called Passover, was approaching. The chief priests and legal experts were looking for a way to kill Jesus because they were afraid of the people. Then Satan entered Judas, called Iscariot, who was one of the 12. He went out and discussed with the chief priests and the officers of the temple guard how he could hand Jesus over to them. They were delighted and arranged payment for him. He agreed and began looking for an opportunity to hand Jesus over to them, a time when the crowds would be absent. Jesus sent Peter and John with this task: go and prepare for us to eat the Passover meal. They said to him, where do you want us to prepare it? Jesus replied, when you go into the city, a man carrying a water jar will meet you. Follow him to the house he enters. Say to the owner of the house, the teacher says to you, where is the guest room where I can eat the Passover with my disciples? He will show you a large upstairs room already furnished. Make preparations there. They went and found everything just as Jesus told them, and they prepared the Passover meal. When the time came, Jesus took his seat at the table, and the apostles joined him. He said to them, I have earnestly desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer. I tell you, I won't eat it until it is fulfilled in God's kingdom. After taking a cup and giving thanks, he said, take this and share it among yourselves. I tell you that from now on I won't drink from the fruit of the vine until God's kingdom has come. After taking the bread and giving thanks, he broke it and gave it to them, saying, this is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. In the same way, he took the cup after the meal and said, this cup is the new covenant by my blood, which is poured out for you. But look, my betrayer is with me. His hand is on this table. The human one goes just as it has been determined, but how terrible it is for that person who betrays him. They began to argue among themselves about which of them it could possibly be who would do this. An argument broke out among the disciples over which one of them should be regarded as the greatest. But Jesus said to them, the kings of the Gentiles rule over their subjects, and those in authority over them are called friends of the people. But that's not the way it will be with you. Instead, the greatest among you must become like a person of lower status, and a leader like a servant. So which one is greater, the one who is seated at the table or the one who serves at the table? Isn't it the one who is seated at the table? But I am among you as one who serves. You are the ones who have continued with me in my trials, and I confer royal power on you, just as my Father granted royal power to me. Thus you will eat and drink at my table in my kingdom, and you will sit on thrones overseeing the 12 tribes of Israel. Simon, Simon, look, Satan has asserted the right to sift you all like wheat. However, I have prayed for you that your faith won't fail. When you have returned, strengthen your brothers and sisters. Peter responded, Lord, I'm ready to go with you both to prison and to death. Jesus replied, I tell you, Peter, the rooster won't crow today before you have denied 3 times that you know me. Jesus said to them, when I sent you out without a wallet, bag, or sandals, you didn't lack anything, did you? They said, nothing. Then he said to them, but now whoever has a wallet must take it, likewise a bag. And those who don't own a sword must sell their clothes and buy one. I tell you, this scripture must be fulfilled in relation to me. And he was counted among the criminals. Indeed, what's written about me is nearing completion. They said to him, Lord, look, here are 2 swords. He replied, enough of that. Jesus left and made his way to the Mount of Olives, as was his custom, and the disciples followed him. When he arrived, he said to them, pray that you won't give in to temptation. He withdrew from them about a stone's throw, knelt down and prayed. He said, Father, if it's your will, take this cup of suffering away from me. However, not my will, but your will must be done. Then a heavenly angel appeared to him and strengthened him. He was in anguish and prayed even more earnestly. His sweat became like drops of blood falling on the ground. When he got up from praying, he went to the disciples. He found them asleep, overcome by grief. He said to them, why are you sleeping? Get up and pray so that you won't give in to temptation. While Jesus was still speaking, a crowd appeared, and the one called Judas, one of the 12, was leading them. He approached Jesus kiss him. Jesus said to him, Judas, would you betray the human one with a kiss? When those around him recognized what was about to happen, they said, Lord, should we fight with our swords? One of them struck the high priest's servant, cutting off his right ear. Jesus responded, Stop, no more of this. He touched the slave's ear and healed him. Then Jesus said to the chief priests, the officers of the temple guard, and the elders who had come to get him, Have you come with swords and clubs to arrest me, as though I were a thief? Day after day I was with you in the temple, but you didn't arrest me. But this is your time, when darkness rules. After they arrested Jesus, they led him away and brought him to the high priest's house. Peter followed from a distance. When they lit a fire and sat down together, Peter sat among them. Then a servant woman saw him sitting in the firelight. She stared at him and said, This man was with him too. But Peter denied it, saying, Woman, I don't know him. A little while later, someone else saw him and said, You are one of them too. But Peter said, Man, I'm not. An hour or so later, someone else insisted, This man must have been with him because he's a Galilean too. Peter responded, Man, I don't know what you're talking about. At that very moment, while Peter was still speaking, a rooster crowed. The Lord turned and looked straight at Peter. And Peter remembered the Lord's words, Before a rooster crows today, you will deny me 3 times. And Peter went out and cried uncontrollably. The men who were holding Jesus in custody taunted him while they beat him. They blindfolded him and asked him repeatedly, Prophesy, who hit you? When morning came, insulting him, they said many other horrible things against him. When morning came, the elders of the people, both chief priests and legal experts, came together, and Jesus was brought before their council. They said, If you are the Christ, tell us. He answered, If I tell you, you won't believe. And if I ask you a question, you won't answer. But from now on, the human one will be seated on the right side of the power of God. They all said, Are you God's son then? He replied, You say that I am. Then they said, Why do we need further testimony? We've heard it from his own lips. The whole assembly got up and led Jesus to Pilate and began to accuse him. They said, We found this man misleading our people, opposing the payment of taxes to Caesar, and claiming that he is the Christ, a king. Pilate asked him, Are you the king of the Jews? Jesus replied, That's what you say. Then Pilate said to the chief priests and the crowds, I find no legal basis for action against this man. But they objected strenuously, saying, He agitates the people with his teaching throughout Judea, starting from Galilee all the way here. Hearing this, Pilate asked if the man was a Galilean. When he learned that Jesus was from Herod's district, he sent him to Herod, who was also in Jerusalem at that time. Herod was very glad to see Jesus, for he had heard about Jesus and had wanted to see him for quite some time. He was hoping to see Jesus perform some sign. Herod questioned Jesus at length, but Jesus didn't respond to him. The chief priests and the legal experts were there, fiercely accusing Jesus. Herod and his soldiers treated Jesus with contempt. Herod mocked him by dressing Jesus up in elegant clothes and sending him back to Pilate. Pilate and Herod became friends with each other that day. Before this, they had been enemies. Then Pilate called together the chief priests and the leaders of the people. You brought this man before me. He said to them, You brought this man before me as one who is misleading the people. I've questioned him in your presence and found nothing in this man's conduct that provides a legal basis for the charges you have brought against him. Neither did Herod, because Herod returned him to us. He's done nothing that deserves death. Therefore, I'll have him whipped and let him go." But with one voice they shouted, "Away with this man, release Barabbas to us." Barabbas had been thrown into prison because of a riot that had occurred in the city and for murder. Pilate addressed them again because he wanted to release Jesus. They kept shouting out, "Crucify him, crucify him." For the third time, Pilate said to them, "Why? What wrong has he done? I found no legal basis for the death penalty in his case. Therefore, I will have him whipped and let him go." But they were adamant, shouting their demand that Jesus be crucified. Their voices won out. Pilate issued his decision to grant their request. He released the one they asked for, who had been thrown into prison because of a riot and murder, but he handed Jesus over to their will. As they led Jesus away, they grabbed Simon, a man from Cyrene who was coming in from the countryside. They put the cross on his back and made him carry it behind Jesus. A huge crowd of people followed Jesus, including women who were mourning and wailing for him. Jesus turned to the women and said to them, "Daughters of Jerusalem, don't cry for me. Rather, cry for yourselves and your children. The time will come when they will say, 'Happy are those who are unable to become pregnant, the wombs that never gave birth and the breasts that never nursed a child.' Then they will say to the mountains, 'Fall on us,' and to the hills, 'Cover us.' If they do these things while the tree is green, what will happen when it is dry?" They also led 2 other criminals to be executed with Jesus. When they arrived at the place called the Skull, they crucified him along with the criminals, one on his right and the other on his left. Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing." They drew lots as a way of dividing up his clothing. The people were standing around watching. But the leaders sneered at him, saying, "He saved others. Let him save himself if he really is the Christ sent from God, the chosen one." If he really is the Christ sent from God, the chosen one. If he really is the Christ sent from God, the chosen one. The soldiers also mocked him. They came up to him, offering him sour wine and saying, "If you are the king of the Jews, save yourself." Above his head was a notice of the formal charge against him. It read, "This is the king of the Jews." One of the criminals hanging next to Jesus insulted him, "Aren't you the Christ? Save yourself and us." Responding, the other criminal spoke harshly to him, "Don't you fear God, seeing that you've also been sentenced to die? We are rightly condemned, for we are receiving the appropriate sentence for what we did, but this man has done nothing wrong." Then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." Jesus replied, "I assure you that today you'll be with me in paradise." It was now about noon, and darkness covered the whole earth until about 3 o'clock, while the sun stopped shining. Then the curtain in the sanctuary tore down the middle. Crying out in a loud voice, Jesus said, "Father, into your hands I entrust my life." After he said this, he breathed for the last time. When the centurion saw what happened, he praised God, saying, "It's really true, this man was righteous." All the crowds who had come together to see this event returned to their homes, beating their chests after seeing what had happened. And everyone who knew him, including the women who had come to him from Galilee, including the women who had followed him from Galilee, stood at a distance observing these things. Now there was a man named Joseph, who was a member of the council. He was a good and righteous man. He hadn't agreed with the plan and actions of the council. He was from the Jewish city of Arimathea and eagerly anticipated God's kingdom. This man went to Pilate and asked for Jesus' body. Taking it down, he wrapped it in a linen cloth and laid it in a tomb carved out of the rock in which no one had ever been buried. It was preparation day for the Sabbath, and the Sabbath was quickly approaching. The women who had come with Jesus from Galilee followed Joseph. They saw the tomb and how Jesus' body was laid in it, then went away and prepared fragrant spices and perfumed oils. They rested on the Sabbath in keeping with the commandment. Very early, actually, we'll just stop there.